Now that this is in the books, what are the takeaways? We talked a bit about Ukraine, the deliverables for this president.
Well, Ukraine was certainly the big deliverable for the U.S. administration, not just the signing of the bilateral security agreement yesterday, which really pushes forward as well to the NATO meeting that will be in D.C. in the next few weeks, but also the frozen Russian assets. We learned more about that deal today. Now that there's the political will there, the technocrats will really get to work to make sure that that $50 billion loan will be paid to Ukraine before the end of the year. Two key things we learned from a senior administrative official briefing reporters on the ground here. One is that it's not just going to be the United States. There's a signal from Europe that they want to take part of this, and also Japan is trying to figure out how they can also take part of this. And Canada is talking about that they for sure are going to make sure that they are sending about $5 billion worth of that to Ukraine as well. What is interesting now is what happens at the European Union level. The United States is very confident, given the fact that you have Germany, France, Italy here, and also representatives from the EU, that they can get all the EU 27 to sign up to make sure that in concrete terms, those frozen assets remain immobilized. Because remember, those are on a 6-month renewal right now at the EU. So that's a big part of this process. So even though it was a huge win for this administration, this story is going to considerably continue to develop over the next couple of months.
And of course, Annmarie, that's really just in regard to Ukraine. There were a lot of other subjects broached at this G7, including the challenges presented by China. I know that's something you spoke about with Ajay Banga, the president of the World Bank, earlier today. This is what he told you, and we'll have you tell us more.
It's not an either or. By just China. People are borrowing money from India. They're borrowing money from the United States. They're borrowing money from the UK. Remember this, bilateral creditors have been around for a long time. It may be called ODA in some cases, maybe actual lending through some countries. There are countries borrowing bilaterally as well. I don't think it's an either or.
So, Annmarie, obviously, him talking to you about the competition in lending. What were the other takeaways from your conversation?
Well, he might not see it, Ajay Banga, as a complete either or when it comes to China or the West. But many would point to the fact that China is the biggest bilateral creditor. And some would even say that now there's a debt trap when it comes to a number of countries, specifically in Africa. So you had on the sidelines of yesterday's meeting, and something the president really wanted to focus on, as well as the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, is more private investment going to places like Africa. For the United States, although they may not come out and say it, this is clearly an alternative to some of these countries looking to Beijing. And for someone like Giorgia Meloni, this is a pitch she really tries to have at home domestically, build up jobs in Africa, food security, energy security, to try to quell some of the migration flows. That's one of the big takeaways I had on the sidelines here when it comes to China, not just when it comes to debt, but also the communique will reflect the fact that they want to go after China in terms of its enabling of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, as well as its overcapacity. And one final thought I'll say on my conversation with the World Bank president was he talks about not just the World Bank looking at impoverished countries, but also a more holistic approach, things like climate as well. And I asked him if that was at risk if we were to see a Trump presidency. And he said, look, Trump was willing to boost capital investment in his last presidency, and he's prepared for potentially him doing that again. Whether or not we get Trump or Biden, he feels like the World Bank is going to get that boost from the United States.
All right, Bloomberg's Annmarie Hordern live in Italy this evening. Safe travels back. Thank you so much. Now, speaking of former President Donald Trump, he's set to campaign in the swing state of Michigan this weekend, following his meetings yesterday with congressional Republicans on Capitol Hill here in Washington, and of course today, his 78th birthday. Joining us now with more is Bloomberg's Hadriana Lowenkron. So, Hadriana, obviously, Donald Trump is no longer here in Washington. He is now in Florida. I understand a big birthday celebration going to be happening in Palm Beach tonight. What will the significance be of this weekend for his campaign?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, he's been very busy. He was in D.C. I think something big to note there is speaking not just with members on the Hill, but also big CEOs, business leaders, people who he's looking for in terms of donors. And so we know that after a lot of these legal events that have happened, including his conviction in New York, but he was getting a lot of money from small dollar donors. Now we're looking to see where can he go in terms of Wall Street. And this was one of the events he was talking about, cutting the corporate tax rate to 20%. He's really appealing to this demographic. And then, as you mentioned, he's headed to Detroit. He's looking to, court Black and Hispanic voters, union members. Michigan's going to be big. And so we'll see what comes of that.
Michigan's going to be big, all right. And some of these economic proposals will be tested there. Donald Trump floating the idea again, as Hadriana mentions, tariffs to pay for income tax cuts, thinking, of course, of extending or making the Trump tax cuts permanent. We ran that past former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers in his conversation with David Weston on Wall Street Week.
Replacing the income tax with revenue with tariff would be the worst macroeconomic policy proposal in U.S. history.
So how do you really feel? It's an interesting reaction to something that actually had, to your point, the attention of 90 CEOs here in town yesterday. Now, Donald Trump has to put all of this together, just like Joe Biden's going to try to for a debate. And that's less than 2 weeks off. They both have little time to prepare for this. And Joe Biden, as we were discussing, has been overseas, 2 trips overseas. He's going to California now before he gets to Camp David to start bearing down. Do they have enough time to get ready for this?
We're going to see. Obviously, this is something that the country will be looking at. It's very early on. Usually we don't have debates until later. We have another one, I believe, on the books for September. We'll see what comes of that. But, for now, they each have been kind of doing some debate prep. They have kind of people in their close circles. What'll be interesting about this is that so many Americans' minds have already been made up. And, usually we look at debates for the entertainment value. We're looking, who has, that quip or who has that kind of one-liner that people remember. Now it's who's going to mess up and who does not mess up. And so I think maybe they'll be each kind of hoping the other person talks more and giving the other person that chance. But, in terms of what to expect, obviously there's the economy and there's immigration is really top of mind. So we'll see kind of whose message really appeals to the public.